Thank you. Never in my life did I imagine that I would be up on stage after a photo of Ian riding a rainbow My Little Pony was displayed for 7 minutes, but I will do the best that I can. So as John said, in September 2013, headline hit the internet that Microsoft was acquiring Nokia's Devices and Services division. That started a 16, 18-month in deep, heartfelt, one-on-one relationship between myself and Delta Airlines, going back and forth to Finland as I was working on this integration project. What I want to do is share a little bit of this experience we had in the context of cloud identity. Now, Microsoft's a big company. We do lots of acquisitions. This shouldn't have been that big of a deal. And in fact, we do a lot of acquisitions. 15, 18 annually. We have a dedicated team that does nothing but goes, buys companies, integrates them, brings them in, okay? The last big acquisition, though, that we had done was Skype, and that was about 1,200 users. Our philosophy at this point for doing acquisitions was pretty easy. We're the big fish, they're the little fish, and we would eat them. Integration was completely a misnomer, okay? There was no integration about this. We would walk in, we would take 100 laptops, say, here's your laptops, here's your accounts. We'd pick up all of their IP, re-network their offices, and say, congratulations, you're now a Microsoft employee. Your check will come on the 15th, okay? There was no hand-holding. If you wanted to keep your email, you better save it to your hard drive locally. We weren't very nice about it. However, when we started looking at Nokia, Nokia was 65,000 people in hundreds of sites with 7 factories. We were suddenly in the hardware business like we had never been before. The integration rule book tossed out the window. We had to start from scratch. We had to start to figure out exactly how we were going to do an integration. Now, you think that when a deal like this is made, you get really, twice every time. You'd think that when a deal gets made, it's guys like these, like Steve Ballmer and Stephen Elop, who are deciding what's going to happen. No, they decided that it was going to be a lot of billions of dollars, and they decided a couple of the big details, like we're going to buy the Devices and Services division, but they leave it up to these guys. They leave it up to the lawyers to decide kind of what the details are, how this is really going to work. And let me tell you, lawyers don't care what is possible. Lawyers care what they can put in the contract and what sounds good as they're sitting across the table from the other lawyers. So you realize that you end up with lawyers who put in the acquisition agreements or in the support agreements statements like, on January 23rd at midnight Pacific time, all transferring employees have to start sending email as at Microsoft.com. And there can be no connectivity or services or data transfers prior to January 23rd at midnight when that integration occurs. And so all of a sudden you have these like conflicting requirements, and you're trying to figure out exactly how this is going to work. And all of this is happening fast. Our run-up to day one was the day when we initially hired a large bulk of the Nokia employees into Microsoft. Day one is when we had to change their email addresses. We had some requirements like some set of users and some set of are going to need access to some set of applications, and we'll figure out the details and let you know when, but please just make all that work, okay? We also knew that the execs were going to want to be able to send out the comms. Hey, welcome to Microsoft, okay? For those trying to do quick math here, October to January is about 14 weeks to tie together 2 big companies like this. It was pretty intense, okay? And of course, rule number 1 being in IT, you can't break the business. Okay? Nokia has to keep going along, keep making phones, doing what they're doing. Microsoft has to keep going along, doing what it's doing. And the two, you need to put them together, but don't break anything. Okay? Now, for those who have ever seen any talk that I've done, if this goes forward, we all know, because I repeat this a lot, that identity management is exception management, right? Even with the complexities of doing an integration, if all the standards and all the rules apply, there's no problem. You program the computers and they just work. But that's not how identity management works. Identity management is about managing the exceptions. Identity management is about things like when the CEO of Nokia says, oh, I know that nobody's being moved into the Microsoft directory and Microsoft environments yet, but I want to be. And when I want to be, I need my 3 admins and my chief of staff and their kids and their dog and their favorite animals or whatever, any of their favorite people, they all have to be moved too because we're special snowflakes. Okay? So it's all about the exception management. But there were big exceptions here as well. As we were looking to piece this together and figure out how we took the on-prem, the other on-prem, multitude of clouds, and pieced them together, we also had to divest 3 companies from Nokia at the same time. Okay? So Nokia Music Services, the Nokia Here software that makes the navigation software, and this newly formed company that we just started to refer to as New Nokia. It was their research and development, their CTO office. They weren't part of the deal. And Nokia being a large international company, there were some countries that weren't entirely certain that they wanted to sign off on this yet. So India, China, a couple of others, they were going to hold off and be late. So until those countries signed off, these people couldn't become employees. Suddenly, the identity and access landscape starts to get really complicated. And when we look at the pieces that we started with the environments, we see that Nokia had their own environment. They had on-prem directories. They had a lot of technology like an Oracle directory, CA SiteMinder. They use Ping Federate to get up to their cloud services. They're an Office 365 dedicated customer. And Microsoft. Well, largely we're a Windows shop. Well, at least we were. I used to say largely we're a Windows shop. It's true, until we acquired Nokia. Now about 1/3 of the company runs on various versions of NIX. But Microsoft is largely Windows. We've got our different clouds, our SaaS providers, our services. And we wanted to try to tie these together. Funny part, not identity related necessarily, but funny part about the integration, one of the first things we discovered, RFC 1918, it's that network space, the private IP space, the 10 dots, right? Nokia used all of it. Microsoft uses all of it. We had almost 100% complete IP address overlap between the two companies, so we couldn't even get things to talk to one another if we had been allowed to. Just some of the challenges we had to work through before we could even get up to the identity stack. But as soon as we got some of the connectivity issues resolved, and we started looking at clouds, what's the first challenge that we ran into? Namespaces. Microsoft bought the Nokia Devices and Services division. That did not include the name Nokia.com. If you think about your cloud services, all your cloud services are dependent and bound to your namespaces. You can have many. Microsoft has a ton of namespaces that we associate with our clouds. But we could not, for example, synchronize a user's Nokia.com email address from their cloud up into ours because we didn't own Nokia.com. We also couldn't change these people's email addresses to Microsoft.com because the deal hadn't gone through yet. Namespaces certainly turned into a big conflict for us. So what did we do? We leveraged Forefront Identity Manager, which does all of our data synchronization. We hopped through a temporary directory. We actually just used one of our domains. And we started to synchronize all of the Nokia user data as it would be. Once these people transferred over, once we had their email addresses changed, once we had their UPNs updated, once we had their link attributes updated, once we had all their attributes aligned, yeah, we're going to pretend that had all happened in the Nokia directory, store that on the Microsoft side, and then shovel that up into our cloud. Why? Because on this day one, all of a sudden, people were going to start receiving email in through our cloud, and the users had to be up there. Now, there was one thing that we got really lucky on here. And the thing we got really lucky with was that Nokia didn't use certificates very much. And the reason that was important is because if they had used certificates the way Microsoft did, then all of the users' user principal names, bpool@microsoft.com, are embedded in those certs, and you couldn't change them. We got lucky that Nokia didn't use certs. They didn't configure them with UPN, so we were able to go in and start messing with usernames and things to be able to make them a little more cloud compatible because, again, the UPN namespace is tied and very tightly coupled to your cloud. Now, you think when you're talking about synchronizing and moving data back and forth, you're shoveling data up into the cloud, and once it's there, it works and it just happens. Turns out that we had to learn a little bit more about the inner workings of the cloud. It's very foggy up there, than we would have wanted to. And what I mean is, in the Microsoft cloud, in Office 365, there's multiple workloads. There's SharePoint Online, there's Exchange Online, there's Lync Online, Skype for Business Online now. Turns out that when you sync the data up into Azure Active Directory, it sits there for a little bit, and then it has to sync out to all the different workloads. And that can take time, sometimes a lot of time. Sometimes, if you sync 65,000 incoming employees up into the cloud all at once, they could put you into what we started referring to as a slow lane, and it could take 3 or 4 or 5 days worth of time. This becomes really awkward when you're on a very tight schedule, and you've got execs who are trying to send emails out and communications out to all these people. Sometimes, another lesson that we learned was you really need to tightly couple changes that are happening in your directory with changes that are happening in the infrastructure. And when that happens, 3, 4, 5 hour or multi-day sync latencies just result in an outage. And so we were able to partner closely with the O365 team and actually simultaneously make changes in multiple directories and the infrastructure all at the same time. This was how we were able to change Lync over. Now, you think, oh, hey, you're Microsoft. Of course you can partner with Office 365. Actually, no, they would hang up on us most of the time. Most of the time, that team would actually send us to the CSS support queue because we have this really strong relationship with them, which is MSIT is a customer, they are our vendor, and they don't treat us, well, in this case, we browbeat them a little bit, but we got them to recognize the need that they need to treat us a little bit special, okay? And so really having that relationship, you really do need to be able to partner with your cloud vendor to be treated a little bit special in these kind of extraordinary circumstances. And then there was the application access. Now, application access was sort of this nightmarish thing because the initial requirements were some set of identified users are going to need access to some set of applications. As we rapidly approached day one, the refined set of users or the refined set of requirements were some set of users that we're still working to identify are going to need access to some set of applications that we're still trying to identify. Nobody knew. The finance people were like, well, finance apps. Do you know what those are? No, we haven't figured that out yet. HR was the same way. Sales guys are the same thing. All we know is that we just have to have access to the data. We don't know where it is or how it's going to work. So from the IAM perspective, what this meant, we had to provide solutions that could provide any user access to any app in either direction, regardless of what it was going to take. Okay? We did this with a little bit of leveraging on-prem Active Directory. Fortunately, since our federation infrastructure on both sides was used to access the respective clouds, we were able to light up federated apps very easily. Turns out that federated apps just worked. Okay? We did a lot of synchronization work on the back-end synchronizations to get the users into the right spots and to get their profile data into the right format. Ton of attribute mapping. So to summarize, this was really an adventure, okay? And with this adventure, we learned quite a few things. We learned you have to be able to negotiate with the lawyers. Turns out that was harder than you would imagine, but we had to be able to do it. Namespaces almost killed us, okay? And whenever I say they almost killed us, what I mean is on day one, Steve and Elop sent mail to all the transferring employees. Satya Nadella sent mail to all the transferring employees. Satya's mail landed, Steven's didn't. Didn't actually make it. And the distinction there, the difference was that Satya's mailbox hadn't been migrated to the cloud yet. He was using our on-prem directory. Steven was up in the cloud. His email never landed. His email failed. Ultimately, that day, for him to be able to send mail to all the employees and welcome to Microsoft, we had to move him back on-prem. We had to pull him out of the cloud. Okay? Knowing what the internals of your cloud are, really, that's the point of the cloud. You're not supposed to have to know how the cloud works. But when you're going into a scenario like this, you really need to understand how your cloud works. Federate applications, I know that in many ways, that's what a lot of Cloud Identity Summit in the past couple of years has been about. But they just worked, and I can't say enough about getting lucky. Okay? The number of times that we looked and were like, whoo, dodged a bullet there, right? But as we wrapped up the project, and there's still a long way to go here. We've been working on this thing for the last couple years now, or for the last year or so, and probably have another 2 years to work. But as we started to wrap up a lot of the formal projects, we had an event, and the MSIT lead for all of the integration stands up to say a couple words. And I want to leave you guys with his words. Maybe? Oh, come on. Okay? So what Jeff said was, if there's one thing this project has taught me, it's that everything goes through identity. Thanks.